Hello, everyone. It is Stephanie Rising. I am here with the lovely Brittni Gutman of Brittni Gutman Allstate Insurance. We're doing this month's AMA on all things P&C. I have my usual list of goody questions to ask, but first I'm going to ask Brittni to introduce herself.
Hi there, Brittni Gutman, Allstate Insurance Agent. Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
Of course, and I see like
Lucy.
we have a little mascot. I could just see the tail moving around. I take it as a good sign. Cats are good luck.
She's a
Um,
Zoom lover.
So jumping into it, one thing that I wanted to ask you right off the bat is, as a P&C agent, what trends have you seen among insurance claims with the increase in people working from home?
Yeah, actually, work from home and remote positions have become extremely prevalent since
Mhm.
the pandemic. And while logically it would kind of make sense that claims would be less because there are less cars on the road, um, we've actually seen an influx in cost of parts and materials and labor. So it's actually really just been a wash as far as, having less accidents and less claims because people are not commuting anymore. But the auto industry, especially when it comes to original manufacturers parts, we've seen just a huge inflation over there. So as far as claims go, it's still definitely been a huge factor when it comes to profitability and volatility in the industry.
That's interesting. So it's like working from home is ultimately not necessarily going to affect your budget in that way. Like you're not really going to realize any savings in that particular part of things.
Well, I think when insurance analysts are looking at all of the factors, when we're looking at premiums versus claims, because that's the alligator,
Mhm.
the reality is that no, it doesn't necessarily play into factor in from an insurance industry standpoint, but we do have products that came out since the pandemic that are more in line for people who are driving less miles and kind of a pay per mile opportunity. So we do have products that are advantageous for remote and work from home workers,
Oh,
definitely,
that's
since they're
good.
not a part of that risk pool, right?
Yeah. Any way we can save small business owners money, like I'm always interested. So that's good to know. So if people were interested in exploring more, obviously they could contact you about those products.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Now, what are examples of situations that people have found themselves in, either working from home or using a personal vehicle for work? Like, how can us work from home people best protect our personal assets? Because we got into this a little bit in my conversation with Todd Jarvis, uh, the attorney. That line between what's personal and what's professional can get really blurry for a small business owner, especially solopreneurs. So what does that look like in terms of asset protection?
Sure. So that actually is it's a great question because I mean the rule of thumb as a consumer is that you want your liability limits to exceed or to protect your net worth, right? So
Mhm.
insurance is required by the state. Everybody has to pay it. State minimum liability limits are 25,000 per person and 50,000 per occurrence. But if you're using your insurance as a tool, which it should be, then you can raise your limits to protect your assets and your net worth in the event of some terrible accident. One thing that I always tell people to be leery of when they have a business or solopreneurship, entrepreneurship, or even working from home, and this mainly boils down to having a human being to talk to, but the second you put a QR code on your car or a magnet or a business brand of any type, you definitely want to reassess your insurance because a lot of insurance providers would negate a claim if
Mhm.
there's any kind of business appropriation on the vehicle, period.
Okay.
And even furthermore, outside of an insurance, piece, the state of Arizona requires that if you're going to drive around with an emblem of a business as small as a QR code, you have to have your vehicle commercially registered. And
Mhm.
not a lot of people know that either. And so I think, just long story short, is, just to make sure that you have, like with Todd, if you
Mhm.
don't have a trust set up or an estate set up, those are really great tools to protect your assets or to make your assets look less, your personal assets to look less or separate from your other earnings, net worth.
These are all really good to know because I think the whole work from home phenomenon, I don't know if people always think to make these kinds of adjustments when they're changing their work habits or their work environment. And even like, what should somebody keep in mind if they occasionally have clients come to their house? I mean,
Hmm.
most of us we're working remotely, we're telecommuting through the screen. But let's say every once in a while, a client needs to come to your home to pick something up or drop something off, or you just need to have a quick chat with them or something like that. I don't think it's really common to have clients come to your house, but God forbid they do and they have a trip and fall. What kind of liability is involved from that perspective?
Yeah, another great question. So blurred lines, all of that, and
Yeah,
I know we're friends on the internet. I just posted something the other day saying your insurance agent can't be the last to know. And it's
yeah.
true, because we are, even my own father said, "Hey, I called you and told you I've got solar, didn't I?" No. And how many chicken coops have you built since the last time we talked? It's imperative that you have these conversations. I mean, every insurance policy is different, right? I mean, work from home, obviously, we still want an element of a business policy or a business liability
Mhm.
policy, or what kind of protection do we need that's going to be more for the business versus the home. But a lot of home policies, you have to have a work from home endorsement or a business in the home endorsement, even in order for your business equipment to be covered. Like me, for example, I have my office computers at home. I use them for personal use too. So
Mhm.
if my house burns down, which policy am I going to put that under, right? And
Yes.
so those are the conversations, and those are always usually ever evolving conversations, right? Like
Mhm.
sometimes mobile notaries will go to start taking appointments at their home, and they don't tell anybody that they've done that. They don't certainly tell their insurance agent. And, in those situations, it's not necessarily that we want to be concerned about, a loss of that person's document or whatever, but, Fido might not like that person and maybe nip
Right.
at them, or, they do trip and fall. And I've had instances, Stephanie, where clients of mine have called ter- inspections for pests and termites, and then allowed that vendor to use their ladder to get the bees, and their ladder malfunctioned. Who
Mm.
does that fall on, right? Well, does
Mhm.
the pest control company have an endorsement on their policy for using other people's equipment, or does the homeowner have a liability because they expressed that they had safe equipment for someone else to use? And I mean,
Mm.
there's so many blurred lines, and that's why I I I always fall back on, I have a license for this, and I have to take continuing education for this, and you don't have to be the expert. People all the time have things like what you're mentioning,
Mhm.
and it's always an after the fact conversation, and it's
Yeah.
like, if I just would have known, or if you would have told me,
Yeah.
um, but definitely there's endorsements that can be put on. A lot of people, not to ramble, a lot of people though are using their personal vehicles now for Uber, DoorDash, Lyft. Sometimes
Mm.
they'll
Good point.
deliver food, right, for
Mhm.
people, and you have to have an endorsement. In our agency, it's called a ride for hire endorsement. But there are blurred areas that you definitely want to be sure that you're communicating, that you're told by someone yes or no. Because I have insurance that if I tell you wrong, I'm covered, and you want that.
Yes. Yes. So
Yeah,
really, like at the end of the day, when in doubt, have the conversation with your agent, and at least once or twice a year, just because you're going to know better than me what questions to ask, and you'll probably suss things out that I wouldn't even think to confess to you, right?
sure. Yeah,
So, okay, that's
absolutely.
that's good to know. So it's not like there's one answer. It really depends on the collection of circumstances and how your personal and your business policies talk to one another in a way.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it depends on what you're doing too. I mean, if you're consulting someone at your kitchen table, that's different than you teaching, a gym class in your garage, right? And people are
Yeah.
doing weightlifting.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to have a conversation with someone and have the
Okay.
right endorsements on the policy. Yeah.
No, those are really good examples because obviously, like my frame of reference is just, working out of my house as a consultant, but people work out of their house in all kinds of ways under lots of different circumstances, and they use different parts of their house in different ways. So really make sure your tush is covered. A big theme of a lot of these interviews that I'm doing with you guys is around like different aspects of risk management, because like what you said, you don't know what you don't know until it bites you in the ass, and then it's too late.
Yeah.
So how can we be a little more proactive about that? So along those lines, my next question on my handy dandy little cheat sheet over here is, when people have to file a claim, they often don't know what's involved, or they worry that their claim is going to be rejected. Can you like very briefly take us through the claims process, and also can you share common reasons for why a claim might be rejected?
Absolutely. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but in my agency, rejected or denied claims are rare, and the reason for that is because we have education beforehand, right? Like
Mhm.
you call us, we have a conversation with you. If you have a roof leak, I've first of all been there, done that, got the tarp, and I've been doing this for 17 years. So our cumulatively, we have 100 years of knowledge in my agency. And so we usually will have a conversation with you. But claims are the most vulnerable, crucial, and it's where the magic happens for my agency, right? Like I double as a meteorologist. I don't know if you know this, but when when these storms are happening and I'm just watching these catastrophes, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, tomorrow's going to be a wreck, at the office. Everybody's going to have something going on. But you have a roof leak. A few things we want to do is we want to have someone come out to make sure the damage doesn't get any worse. That's going to be, you calling me, my agency, and us referring you to a trusted partner, right?
Mhm.
Then we're going to have someone come out and assess the damages, and we're going to have a conversation with you about your deductible. And a lot of people think that they have to pay their deductible in order for their insurance company to support them. And that's not factual at all. We assess the damages and then say it's $5,000 and you have $1,000 deductible, assuming it's all approved and, good, you would end up with a check for $4,000. And then you can do as you wish with that money. You can hire George to repair the drywall. You can hire a handyman. You can hire a general contractor. You can do what you want with the money. If it's not enough money, and you chose a general contractor or a handyman, they can submit supplements, and those supplements would be reviewed, and maybe we'll reimburse more funds or whatever that looks like. Um, Claim denials, like I said, rejections and denials shouldn't happen because you should have the guidance of an agent. We don't want you to have a denied or a rejected claim because it's still a claim. Regardless if $1 million is paid out or zero is paid out, it is still a claim. And that's going to hurt you with me, or that's going to hurt you in your search for insurance whenever that time comes, or many companies cancel people for having too many losses, even zero paid out losses. So it's imperative to have the conversation so that you can be guided for future too. I've been on the other end of phone calls where it's $2,500 in damage and they have $1,000 deductible, and I've encouraged them to maybe pocket this one. Maybe you
Mhm.
should. Sorry, but we're getting ready to have two hurricanes hit the desert, and you might want to save this claim,
Yeah,
and those aren't always pleasant conversations to have either, but
but they're
I
practical.
right. And
Yeah.
I do get more appreciation from those than I do from having the person who had a $1,500 loss and they're calling me in 2 years because their premium is 30% higher and they're mad because I didn't, guide them appropriately. Well, you didn't call me. You filed the claim, you just filed it and, didn't have a conversation. And or
So don't file
oftentimes,
for a claim without speaking to your agent first. Always pick up the phone first. And then you're
yes.
increasing the odds that something will be covered. I mean, just pick up the phone first, not only in a claim
If
situation,
your house
but
burnt down, file the claim. You know what I mean? Call claims, file the claim, get on the fast track. Sure, absolutely. But if it's questionable, like if your
yeah.
power went out and you have 4 freezers that all have rotten food now, and then call me. Let's talk about it. If part of your roof blew off, let's talk about it. I mean, I do have experience, and some conversations, like I said, are better than others, but um, I might shoot myself in the foot here. I had a client the other day, they filed a claim without talking to the agency, and they had a downed mesquite tree and 2 down saguaros. They didn't do any damage to anything. And although it cost $5,000 for a landscaping company to come and cut up that tree and take those swirls away without having caused any damage to the structure, it's not a covered loss. So that's not something they knew, that's not something they knew.
Yeah.
Um, and we'll just, we'll navigate that. Fortunately, unfortunately, more damages have been discovered. So we are still in a claim process and we might be able to allocate some dollars to the removal of those things, but
Mhm.
it wouldn't have happened that way had a conversation not come back to the agency too. And I also want to shed a little light that even though you have an agent, the claims, a lot of insurance companies are trying to keep the two separate. I still say involve your agent in your claim process if you can. And a lot of times agents won't get involved in the claim process because we're not involved. The claims department doesn't involve us either.
Mhm.
But I'm old school in that.
I like that about you.
Thank you. Well, I've been there, I mean, I have a personal friend, her house burnt down and I was at her house at 2 o'clock in the morning, and her agent it was a totally different insurance company. I was just there. And that too is important. Maybe you don't
Mhm.
have an agent, but I have a lot of people that I always tell them, use me as a resource, if you need. And you wouldn't believe how much just having someone like me advocate for you with your company, can
Mhm.
get you further. Sometimes people just accept what they say. And if you had a little bit of a pit bull behind you,
Yeah,
sometimes
and
things
somebody
can
to
work
help you
out.
navigate through it, because it's all as with many things, it's a totally different beast,
Yeah.
insurance. It has its own compliance, it has its own terminology, and if you're not fluent in all of that, right from the start, you could be limiting your own options. So what I'm gathering from this is if you want to maximize your chances of having a claim successfully processed and covered and be made whole, then you have to divulge as much information as possible to your agent so that you have as much coverage as possible.
Right.
So, and speaking of navigating terminology and things that are unknown, that leads us into the next. You used a term the other day, and I had never heard of it before. What in the hell is subrogation? I have never heard of that.
Yeah, so subrogation, I always like to use some of the words that I've learned in my tenure. I was talking with you earlier about words.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why you loved it.
Yes.
So subrogation is actually, it's a very important process. We see it happen a lot when, uh, what can I use as an example? Oh, those pesky gravel trucks, right? So you're driving
Mhm.
down the interstate, you got one of those trucks in front of you, they're not tarped, and they cause all kinds of damage to your front end. I can't say glass damage because they have that stupid sticker now that says we are not responsible for damage to your windshield,
Mm,
but they are responsible for other things. If they lose a bunch of rocks and now you've got, pelts in your bumper, so then you call your insurance company and you file a claim. We will subrogate back to, assuming we have the information, the
mhm.
party at fault, and then they
Okay.
will reimburse us for your repairs, right? Um, Another common place where subrogation comes into play is in condos. There's no clarity in condo policies who's responsible for inner wall plumbing, right? The condo
Mm,
association is usually hard to deal with in many cases. And if it's the tenant above that had a leak,
mm,
so
mhm.
oftentimes your insurance company just wants to get you whole again, right? So we'll come
Right.
in, we'll fix whatever we've got to fix. But if we know it was tenant above you, leaky toilet, we're going to subrogate to them for the losses and recoup some of our costs. So subrogation is, it usually happens behind the scenes. You will never know about it because your bathroom's already done and we want you to be happy. And then in 18 months, all of a sudden you'll get a check for your deductible and you'll be like, what? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
So
Yeah.
in those instances, if I am not at fault and you as the insurance company are also made whole by this third party, does that mean that claim does not affect my rate?
It
Because
should already be input as a no fault if it is
okay,
going to be in lines of subrogation. Yeah.
okay, awesome.
Um, Absolutely. Good question.
So my last question, what I ask everyone is there something that you wish consumers either, better understood about your industry or, are there ways in which they could better utilize their agent as a strategic partner?
Absolutely. I wish that more people would look at insurance as a tool. I really wish that they would look at the opportunity that they have to protect themselves in the event of an unforeseen event, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what it is all about. Um, I wish that people understood what Progressive says, that you can just go online and buy a policy and choose your coverages and choose your price. It's such an unfortunate way of the world now, but I understand it. And I just wish that people would appreciate that while you, you get what you pay for, right? I think at the
Right.
end of the day, um, but
Convenience does not always come with experience.
right.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest thing for me, having been in this for all of my adult life and half of my life, is the only time I get bad news or bad, not necessarily reviews on my agency, but maybe someone's not happy with their insurance company or they were pissed off at Allstate for something. It always boils down to the claim process. And I don't
Mm,
have a leg to stand on if I wasn't there with you, right? If you didn't
yeah.
involve me, I can't help. And I feel so helpless and without a voice when people come to me after the fact and they were in the right, and they were
Mhm.
not treated appropriately or it didn't go their way, and it shouldn't be that way all the time. I'm very loyal to my company, don't get me wrong, but I am way more true to my client at the end of the
Mhm.
day. And I say that confidently because I had a customer 2 years ago. I had to fight really hard with the company to get a roof approved. And we had 2 denials, and I didn't like it, and I knew that it was wrong. And about 2 months later, we had a check for $30,000 to that customer. It took me having to call in some friends and to get some other reports written up, but Progressive's not going to do that for you, you know? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, whether it's me or, another local good, just I think there's something to be said about even being angry at a human being just feels better, you know? If you want to be mad at me, then that's fine, but at least include me in the process, you know?
So never underestimate the power of catharsis in insurance.
Amen, sister.
Well, I appreciate what an amazing advocate you are for your clients, and I really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions. And these were really useful, practical, real life examples. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I
My
appreciate you and
pleasure.
all you do.
Well, thanks, Brett. All right, guys, that is it. Next month, I will have another guest in another AMA, hard to say, series. And as always, if you have any questions or particular topics that you would like us to explore, please let me know, because we really like talking about these things. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye.